then this becomes a key part of the answer to government's problem. So here is the reality. If I think in my mind of a secondary city in Burkina Faso or a tertiary city in a state in India, almost certainly the reality is the following. The local government does not have the resources, budget, human, whatever, to solve the problem on its own. It does not have it. But they never think, stop trying. Our message is, stop trying and rethink your model. You can't do it alone. Don't forget, we're talking about urbanization happening in, generally speaking, the poorest countries of the world, and in small cities whose names we don't even know. So they already have problems with existing challenges without the future. In changing the government's model, we also ask them to change how they think about the slums, or the favelas, or the barrios, whatever they want to call them. And stop thinking of these as people who came along to destroy your city, which is how governments respond. And rather think about everyone in those slums as a middle-class person in waiting, who came to improve his or her life and just wants the opportunity to be able to do that. And these are very simple things to say, difficult for governments to accept, but they lead to very different policies if this is how your mind changes. So if you start looking at the slums, not as slums, but as future suburbs of your city, which is what they are, and they will be, as they were in Paris, and as they were in London, and as they were in New York. No city has ever grown up without slums. It's just what we're dealing with is a different pace and a different level. And then the third mindset that we would ask governments to reconsider, and this is very relevant in this, and for my job, is that there are very real limits to the impact of aid. Very real. And ultimately, I don't know of any city that came out of poverty because of development assistance. It's never happened. The key, ultimately, for successful development is to mobilize the resources in that society, in that community, starting with in that slum, in that local government, and amongst all of the non-state actors in that locality, in that commune. That means the slum dwellers, it means residents' organizations, it means the private sector. And the private sector in many countries and the slum dwellers are in fact the same people. Those are very entrepreneurial operators seeking to get their own way out of poverty. An intelligent local government recognizes that the energy in the slums of people trying to improve their lives is an energy they need to capture and harness and work with, as opposed to prevent. So that the first big change in government policy that we advocate and that successful governments have seen have to recognize the citizenship of the entire city, not parts of the city, and to try and mobilize those resources for the benefit of the entire city itself. Again, easy to say, it sounds obvious when you say it. You go and discuss this with the Honourable Mayor, you'll get a very different response. It looks like you're asking me to legalize these illegal people. Yes, ultimately we are going to, if they're illegal, it most probably means your laws are wrong rather than the people are wrong. It most probably means that the standards you require are inappropriate for the conditions that you're trying to change. So, the policy framework, the mindset is the first challenge, and the second is by accepting the limits of what local government can do, they can then create space for the urban poor, for citizens and for the private sector, and change the relationship. So let me give you specific examples of ways in which we try to do that in our work. Maybe the best example is a program. We've had a very significant change in the way in which the Cities Alliance does its work. And we've just completed that internal redesign. I don't want to take you through the pain of internal restructuring. But the conclusion we've come to, and which we now operationalize, is that the best form of assistance that we can provide to a government, such as the government of Uganda, which is the one that I will give you the example of, is to offer stable, long-term, programmatic support, rather than short-term projects. And this thing called pilots, which never take off. I mean, ultimately, all the work that we've done that has been successful has been because we were there year after year after year, and providing ongoing different levels of support. Admittedly, originally in middle-income countries like Brazil, where we had a lot of success with the help of the government of Italy in the state of Bahia, or in a megacity like Sao Paulo. So in the case of Uganda, Uganda is an interesting example because it is one of the least urbanized countries in Africa, and it is one of the fastest urbanizing. So there are 14 secondary cities in Uganda, as well as Kampala as the main city, and then below that they are very small towns. And by cities I'm talking about as small as 50,000 people. But that's where people live, so that's where we have to get support and services to if they are going to double and triple in size in 15 or 20 years. The other important point in a country like Uganda, which is true in many sub-Saharan African countries, approximately 50% of the population is under 15 years old. So you're looking at an age cohort, which means that this is the future now for this population. And so there's not much time to sit around and wait before we make real progress on Uganda's cities. So we've got a program of an agreement with the government of Uganda, and all of the funds we provide and support are put onto the national budget and are voted on in Parliament. So it's mainstream business. The key mindset is there, which is that the government of Uganda accepts that the urban growth is going to be one of its biggest challenges and also one of its best possibilities. And this is not uncontested. Not everyone agrees with this, but that's the official view of the government. So we've made funds available for the drafting of a national urban policy, which is, a country like Uganda needs to think, what will our country look like where it's mainly cities as opposed to rural areas. But the key in our intervention is to provide support to the local government through direct grants to that city and parallel grants. So 2 grants to each city, one for the local government and one for the organizations of the urban poor. So we fund at the same time the state and the non-state sectors and build a capacity at the same time. The capacity of the urban poor is built by giving them resources to organize themselves into savings groups, to do slum enumeration, to count how many people are there, to quantify what support they need, what services are missing. At the same time, the support to the local government goes to build their capacity to try and provide those services. And in each city that we have put in these resources, they create a municipal forum, which is in effect a discussion/stroke negotiating forum. Because ultimately, the people of Ginger, to take one of the cities, are going to have to come to an agreement amongst themselves about what that city looks like. So, but we fund both sides of the equation, as well as national government, as well as the universities, to try and get students to engage with this dramatic growth in the size of Ugandan cities. At the same time, the national government has created a national urban forum, so that all of the state and non-state actors come together to discuss the role of the private sector, the role of women, the role of savings, the role of credit. It doesn't matter, in rethinking, because ultimately you're rethinking the national model. In 30 years, this country will change from being predominantly rural and agricultural to being a country mainly of small and medium-sized cities. Whether you think it's a good idea or a bad idea is irrelevant. That's what's going to happen, and that's what's happening right now. So that's an example. We are working in this method in 5 countries at the moment, because they take a lot of money each. This is how we've changed our model, as opposed to making small grants of $250,000, or in Uganda we'll be spending closer to $4 million worth of technical assistance over a number of years, and connecting it with big investments from the World Bank, so that it becomes the beginning of a process of transformation. Again, focused on those cities, servicing all of its citizens and planning for a future. So I don't say we've got all the answers right. I think we're asking the right questions with our partners in Uganda. And key to this in the whole model is another element that came up this morning, which is learning between cities. When we talk to a mayor, I must say it is very, very seldom that the mayor says, tell me what the World Bank thinks, or tell me what the UNDP thinks, or what UN Habitat thinks. They do not ask this question. What they ask is, which other city has done this, and what did they do? And so, a key part of our model is facilitating the exchange of experience between cities directly, and between communities within cities directly as well. So we have, for example, provided support. We have assisted in the provision of support from the city of Johannesburg to Lilongwe in Malawi over a number of years of constant, direct support from city administration to city administration. And this was building on the fact that we gave support to Johannesburg 10 years ago to rethink its model. I can give you other examples, the most important of which I think would be the support that has now been taken from, I bring it back to the government of Italy, the support in Bahia and the city of Salvador. All of those lessons and those people, we are now made available resources for them to share their experience in Mozambique, in the city of Maputo and elsewhere. So we now have the relationship that we had in Brazil, which was World Bank, Cities Alliance, Brazilian government and Italian government, is now +1, plus Mozambican government in Mozambique. So we now see this very dramatic change in the way in which international development assistance is taking place. So much more horizontal learning and appropriate sharing of lessons through our model. So the last point I will make, because I've already, I'm sure, spoken too long, is trying to use the experiences of the Cities Alliance with our European members to change the debate also in Europe. Because we find that there's still a reluctance to accept the importance of cities as development partners, the need for a focus on how cities are growing in developing countries, in the likes of India. And we find, in fact, if I look at the situation globally, there's more thinking going on in these governments themselves, which is appropriate, and also in the corporate private sector is further advanced than many of our development partners. So I've done a very quick tour of the world, for which I